Hey IMGs, good morning, good morning, good morning. So I have been looking into the topic of USMLE Step 2 cancellation and how that would affect us as IMGs, right? So I took some notes and I want to share with you what I think will happen or how this would affect the IMG. So first of all, USMLE Step 2CS has been a key part of our certification process. So for those who are watching this who are not IMGs, an international medical student or graduate, before they can get a license to practice medicine in the States, they need to become certified by the ECFMG. The ECFMG is the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. And the ECFMG is basically the primary source verification for medical schools that are outside of the US. So it's the organization that determines who makes a good candidate to practice in the States, who has equivalent training to practice in the States. So for us to get that certificate, primarily we need to have completed USMLE Step 1, Step 2 CK, Step 2 CS. Those are the three key elements of ECFMG certification. So now that they've canceled Step 2 CS indefinitely, really what that does is it puts us in a position where we have to meet other criteria to become certified in order to continue our process of training and practicing in the States. So without an ECFMG certificate, an IMG cannot be granted a license to practice medicine in any of the United States. So it's the ultimate qualifier. So removing CS makes it to where we are left with no option but to create another alternative. And I like that they're being fair in the sense that CS removal is for both IMGs and non-IMGs, meaning American grads, because for those of you who don't know, back in the day, the USMLE CS exam was really dedicated to IMGs in order to determine whether they had the English language proficiency and also the clinical skills to practice in the States. And then they later on expanded that to include American grads. So I like that this cancellation is just not only for American grads, because it could have been, but it includes American grads and IMGs together. Now, what does that mean? That means the ECFMG, which is the organization that says you as an IMG is supposed to have these three exams before we can certify you. Obviously, they also look at your transcript from your medical school and other things, your medical school itself, whether it's accredited or not, before they offer you the certificate. So all things considered, if you meet all these different criteria, then they proceed to say, we define you as a person that is qualified to train and practice in the States, right? So now that that one requirement has been removed, that means ECFMG, what are they supposed to do now? They're supposed to create pathways. Now, for those who applied in 2021, there were 5 pathways, which were alternatives for where CS was initially just suspended. Now, what happened in 2020, during the application season of 2020, for those that are looking to start residency this summer, 2021, there were only 5 pathways, meaning there were some people who had conditions that did not allow them to meet those 5 pathways. And what did that do? What that did was some people were excluded from applying into residency last year. So last September, they couldn't apply into residency, and so therefore they're not even in the match, in this cycle for the match. Now, I went to the ECFMG website because that is the most trusted source. If you're looking for information, you need to go there first. And they specifically stated that they will offer expanded pathways for those that are looking to start residency in 2022. So what this means is, even though this year they had limited pathways, they'll have to create more alternatives to include as many IMGs as possible the next cycle. Now, I did notice that they, on their website, they quoted specifically some numbers so that we know, right? They're trying to reassure us that they're looking at, making this as inclusive as possible. So they're looking to certify, they said they're looking to certify 5,000 IMGs based on these pathways for this cycle. And overall, they have greater than 19,000 IMGs that applied into residency in September 2021. So, wow. Those numbers are really high. Remember, there's only like 35,000 spots. So that's a pretty high number for us. But I guess what they're trying to say is they have looked at certifying already 5,000 people, even though they had this alternative pathway this year. And what they're looking to do is for 2022, so those that will be applying 2021 September, they'll have more expanded pathways for them. So if you couldn't apply this year because maybe you had 2 medical schools or you had something on your application that limited you from becoming eligible, they're looking at expanding this so that next year they can include more people. Now, I know a lot of people want to know how this would affect IMGs and what my thoughts are regarding, eligibility and residency entrance and all that. So this is my personal opinion. I believe that once we have these 5+ pathways, it would allow each and every one of us to be eligible to apply. And what that would do is, if we meet criteria for one of the proposed pathways, then we'll go back to the same playing field like usual. So I don't believe that it would affect residency placement for international medical graduates, because as long as you meet the qualifiers for an alternative pathway, you will be on the same level playing field like the others. Because what does that mean? Okay, you may have a step 1 result, step 2 CK result, and some of you even have step 3, and then you may have to take one of the pathways that requires you to take an English proficiency exam. You'll still meet criteria just like everybody else, because the US grad is going to be taking the same exams like you. So that's, if they're comparing score for score, you're still on the same level playing field. It would have been bad if it was just like, oh, American grads don't take step 2CS and foreign grads have to take it. Then you can argue that there's some level of discrimination there. So I think that it would not make the process more difficult. I don't think it will make it more competitive either. I think it's still the same, because ECFMG is offering these alternatives that would classify as qualifiers. Because really, as foreign medical graduates, the question is, can the physician integrate into the US system without difficulty? Can the physician speak English? Can the physician interact with a patient in an American setting and get all the pertinent information and exercise empathy and compassion and the tenets of professionalism and the 5 tenets of core competencies that physicians are supposed to carry? That's what they're looking for. They're trying to identify if you have or have been trained along those lines. So I think that the fact that they're going to integrate these tenets into step 1 and CK, it makes it to where if you take those other tests and you pass them, then there's nothing that they can hold against you, so to speak, right? So I don't think that, the cancellation will negatively affect IMGs. If anything, you'll be saving money. That test used to cost a lot of money. Like, I remember when I was in medical school, I had to I lived in Chicago, so I went to a Chicago testing site, but I know students who had to travel from whatever state that they were in to fly into like either Philadelphia, Atlanta, and there were like 5 spots. So, accommodation, travel expenses, the exam itself is expensive. I don't remember the price, but I'll put it on here when I look it up. And then, some of us were traveling from other countries to come to the States just to take step 2. So, that's a big deal. That cost saving is pretty big, but do I think that's going to negatively affect IMGs? No. Is it going to make you less competitive? No. Is it going to make it more difficult? No. This is my personal opinion, and I stand by it. I think that IMGs should still focus on scoring really well on step 1. That is, to me, and with my experience coaching at this point over 300 IMGs, I would say, and I can say 300 for sure because it's been more, but I definitely say 300 because those are people that have taken my course in the past, and I know that it's been beneficial for them. And so based on that fact alone, I can say confidently that step 1 scores are still going to be the ultimate ultimate cutoff point, because step 1 has historically always been that score that makes a difference for an American grad or the specialty that you choose to apply into, and even for IMGs who get called back for residency, for interview, I should say. So that being said, I think IMGs need to go back to step 1 and go back to focusing on scoring excessively high on step 1, because that knocks you out the park, makes you extremely competitive. Now you're gonna add step 2 CK on top of that, which in my opinion, step 2 CK was a lot easier than step 1. I don't know what it is. I guess it's the clinical knowledge part, which makes sense because as physicians, that's what we really do, is clinical knowledge. So I like that step one, at this point, for those that are taking the exam this year, what you'll realize is you still have a numerical score, so still score high. Now, for those that are going to take the test in the future, when it becomes pass-fail, you may not have to worry so much about the numerical score part, but I still think you should prepare like someone that wants to have a 260, so that whatever happens, whether there's a numerical score hidden somewhere or a percentile or something that we're not aware of, you still stand a competitive chance. Now, for step two, where there'll still be a numerical score, you should still go again for knocking it out the park, like the 260s, 250s, 240s. Like, guys, give it your ultimate best, because I don't want you to just be like walking a fine line. You want to stand all the way as an outlier. That's what makes you stand out. Whether an IMG or an international grad or a US grad, you want to be an outlier, because then they have nothing to compare you against, and they're just like, this person did extremely well, and that's it, and that's on period, right? Like, they did well, and that was it. So I really think that things that IMGs can do as they move forward, right? Still scoring high on step one for those that are applying for this 2022 cycle. So those that are applying or writing the exam now, where they're still going to get a numerical score. So if you're writing the exam in January, February, March, I bet you're still getting a numerical score. So still work for a high score. If you're applying after January 2022, which is where they said they will probably go into the pass-fail system, then okay, you could do what you want to do. But still, prepare to pass the exam like someone who would have had a numerical score that's really high. It's for you. It's for your own advantage. It's for your own gratification. And more importantly, if you know this material and you can show that you know the material on an exam, then you'll be a good doctor, right? Because you know the material that was tested on the exam. So I think, one, focus on your exam scores. Two, step 2 CK scores may have to get higher, right? Because when we move to pass-fail, step 2 is still going to be numerical. They're going to integrate CS and those tenets that they test in CS into step 1 and step 2. So you should still focus on learning whatever clinical skills that apply. Because think about this. You remember how the stems of the questions usually are like, 6 lines? If they're going to integrate CS and clinical skills, there may be questions there that relate to how to treat a patient in a room. There may be questions there that relate to patient-physician relationship. There may be questions there that relate to draping and how to cover a patient. So they're going to figure out how to test you on these skills even without a physical exam. Obviously, with the pandemic, I feel like limiting interaction, it's to everybody's benefit, limiting travel and all that. But that being said, those are my thoughts regarding the cancellation. I do not believe it would negatively affect IMGs. I don't believe it, because as long as the IMG fulfills the alternative pathway, we should be fine. So guys, stop worrying, stop fretting. The Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates is on your side. And that's something that I encourage you guys to do, is to contact the ECFMG when you have questions. Email them, call them. You'd be surprised how welcoming they are. I have called them on multiple occasions. I was actually wanting to do a video where I called the ECFMG and asked them on the phone so y'all could listen, because they are so supportive. They are on your side. And on their website, which I'll include their link in the bottom of this, they really challenge IMGs to contact them. They want to hear from you. So please do that. I'll put the link where I got all this information from so that you can read on your own and get the information from the source. Don't listen to the blogs and random people who don't know what they're talking about. Go back to the source, okay? I hope this was helpful for you, and stay tuned. And yeah, thanks for watching.